produces certain chemicals, sounds like something that makes you feel good about yourself. Or maybe it's just that from a certain ethereal level just does things for us. If you have someone says hand you a tool and it's like, this doesn't fucking do anything for me, you put the tool down, take the tool and stab him in the neck, like Joe Pesci in that Las Vegas movie. He stabs him with a pen. It's like, I don't need a fucking pen. Here, take it. And so mindless violence isn't, I think, necessary if someone's trying to use a mental tool in a way you don't like, or to have achieved absolutely no value to you, and maybe even to place other people in, by even remotely encouraging other people to think that this is a useful or legitimate instrument for human thought, or to count itself much more as being among those thoughts which have tried very hard with a lot of pain and a lot of danger, and so worthy occupations indeed, to advance a kind of thought that truly makes us safer without making us less safe, and makes good use of the available information about what has made people unsafe and just how unsafe they've been, to the point of death, to the point of agony, to the point of dying with a baby you could barely feed, or being out on the street because some dude fucked you without hearing you first, and millions of other things, right? So if you've ever been hurt, if someone you know has even had a terminal illness, and you thought they have a say, I wonder, we've been around a child and I thought that child doesn't have enough of a say in their safety. Or you can imagine people in the world, or women, or all women, maybe even some little boys, who haven't had enough of a say about anything, whether you understand it or not, whether it makes sense to you or not, whether it pats your beliefs on the back or not, whether it defies everything you think about this, that, or this person in any way. And think about how hard it is for that child to risk defying what you believe and need to believe to make your world happier, to preserve your kingdom, no doubt. And that even accidentally, we can just automatically dismiss the voices of other people. Doesn't make us sociopaths, but it is something that feminists, for instance, have tried to discourage us from, without necessarily walking down the street and slapping us with a dildo and saying, in terms of how much men have fucking hurt and killed and raped women, it's proportional to every woman in the world being able to basically bitch slap 10 different men randomly in their life with a very, very, very painful dildo. And it's just like a monkey punch in the back of the head. And don't be surprised if one day someone does that to you. But don't forget, all women can do that 10 times, which means some men are going to get a good whack. And you'll be like, dude, what is... And then we'll study, like, which men are women favoring to whack over the head with, like, a billy club dildo. And I bet you I'll be one of them. You know, I'll be one of them. I am one of them. You know, I am one of them, and I've got the marks to prove it. And what I decided to do is to learn from the billy club, because the billy club of any sexual predator has a total readout at a deep subconscious genetic level of what everyone in the world needs to learn that made this violence not only possible, but inevitable, and done by a righteous person with absolute righteousness, and with no possibility of that righteousness sustaining any critical objection except on escalated pain to what has become, because we get to decide who the victim is, the assailant, the perpetrator, the evil one, the bull that they pick from a herd of cows and say, you know what, you're a merciless, blood-sucking fucker who should be killed in public, while, imagine having a bad day, or a loved one dying, and while they're dying, there's a crowd of people who think your loved one is a fucking murderer, and they're cheering for your death because they think no one could ever as worthless a predatory fuck as you, while the person doing the death is the merciless predatory fuck, and you're the merciless predatory fucks who are egging them on. So in the bullfight, we see why I say that violence is inevitable in cults and in the modern world, because a lot of our minds don't have enough good judgment and fidelity, because we're keeping up so much magical thinking, which at the same time is totally honestly come by, and I'm sure without any disrespect, us is just going to be a part of your life when we critically and forensically defend the human mind. Magical thinking, suspension of disbelief. Enough that anything I could talk to anyone could, I don't mean to be tricky when I say this, could say, yeah, that's just a part of life. Like, you're slow, man. Like, your brain has actually had a hard time developing, because, like, you're fucking basically just talking about the fact that you've never figured out what life is all about. You don't accept it. You're fighting it, and so you're just analyzing the thing which you reject. Every day you prove more and more you should have fucking accepted to begin with. It's just reality. It's just life. Yes, of course. You get up, you go to work. You don't always know why. You just do it. Right? And everything that goes with that. Now, I'm going to be easy on the listener and say, look, you don't have to like feel a black hole in your heart and think about this. You could say, this is an instrument. All of us is an instrument to critically examine anything and everything that we just might need to examine about human beings, no matter how sacrilegious or stupid or wrong or disrespectful, really, that it could be. And we honor the disrespectful connotations of that. Really, just it could be objected to just in a despicably disrespectful, irreverent sense to all the work that people do in the world. And so as an instrument, you could see it like, okay, well, you would use it this way or by yourself or not in a public classroom anywhere, and apply this instrument to different things. And I would advise people using that instrument to start with your own personal life, really, and you know, what is the most critical insult to your life. And I will acknowledge, and I encourage you to acknowledge, that if you're unable to speak about that to someone, there's probably a good reason for that. Okay. And I'm just one of millions of people you could listen to if you hear what that's been like for other people. Whether or not you should listen to me and make judgments based on me is really besides the point. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not an expert in the sense that I can advise people on how to deal with shocking domestic. I can only tell you that I have dealt with them. And I think there's something beautiful and emotional. Could find something intelligent about them, maybe survive, maybe not, and find yourself that it's okay. It can be a peaceful occupation to talk about things that are the worst things that ever happened or could happen in the world. Find a ready amount of embitteredness and anger and isolation and feel of dread or menace, like, you know, this is going to end up getting me arrested. You know, I do feel the threat that my voice has been tested by, as I've used this very same voice to advocate for my personal safety and that of prospectively millions of other people. And to see how the world and the banking system will talk back to you with the RCMP. Just to get a little taste of that. And I respect boundaries. And this is what keeps me safe. Whenever I test or have tested or been tested by the boundaries of society, in the use of my voice and the strengthening of my voice, the testing of my voice, I acknowledge the boundaries that I find. It's not like I'm a bad person. Boundaries. In the course of using your mouth, you will test boundaries and you respect those boundaries. Now you keep yourself safe. In a sense, you've disrespected them, I suppose, by the time the police are calling you, but you honor the boundary. If you follow it through, honesty in your emotional body, even as scary as it might be to be threatened with arrest, for instance, and you just live and live and live and you endure the threat, because that's what it is, a threat. Right? The police are a threat. That's part of their job, is to be a threat to people like me. It's not something any of them would ever admit. It's not something they're even totally conscious of. But if you think about how you've learned to treat the police, what you've learned about the police, and the extraordinary telling us how amazing the police are, especially in many cases when they use excessive force. And how the most fictional thing about those movies is the critical focus and judgment, say, of someone who knows martial arts, right? And they're critical, really good judgments. They can make enemies or friends or find out, you know, whether someone's really a criminal or not, or working on the inside. Like, their judgment, considering the intensity of the environment they're working in, is really fucking incredible. And that's what really makes the plot possible, is that the main character, or Bruce Willis or whatever in Die Hard, has good judgment. He doesn't blow up the evil terrorist or his twin brother and accidentally blow up his own wife. Otherwise, Die Hard, you know, be like, hey, honey, it's like, oh, fuck, I blew up the other main character and the other half of the romantic dynamic of this entire film. Fuck, I hate Hollywood writers, you know? And it doesn't work, right? So they're always making the right decision, but they're also making the right decision for the plot. And ultimately, the plot is grave. So you're getting a combination of a very intelligent inspector, police officer, who can use a lot of excessive force, does it so well that we can attribute a great focus of mind to it and makes all the right decisions to get all the bad guys, but does take a little damage and lose a few things along the way. But the person who loses the most, of course, is you. Really, because the theater is really more about what it takes away from you than what it gives to you. It's like the economic system. Theater is all economic theater. It's religious theater. It's theater of the damned. It's taking more than it's giving. If you don't object to it, you're assuming you're consenting. If you consent to the face value of every movie and how emotional it is, like I watched a movie with my mom for a while. It involved a young girl starting her career, rolling her truck, getting paralyzed, the police officer, the paramedic who's with her in the helicopter, the mother and father talking and getting to the hospital and crying and doing everything you think as you watch the film. Oh, that's what I would do if I was her mother. That's what I would do if I was her father. I would take command if they have these emotions. And as actors and actresses, their body language is making you emotional just watching them. You're like, my mom and I are just sitting there emotional for 15 minutes, after which we're like, I don't want to watch it anymore. I told us, watch this. I just want to see the part where she gets paralyzed. Because they tell you that's what the movie's about, right? If you read a story, that's what they always say. Like, oh, okay, I want to see the. If you're watching YouTube and it's like, oh, I want to see the part where she gets paralyzed, and you see the slow motion of the truck rolling and flipping. You see her flying out of the car. If you ever walked by the scene of an accident and someone had been flung by from their car and paralyzed, and obviously in a lot of critical pain and shock, right? We can't lose sight of that, right? And you ever thought to yourself, gee, I would love to have had an inside view of how that all happened from beginning to end, like waking up, talking to her mom, talking to her dad, singing to herself in the truck. Her life is ahead of her. The song is like, you're going to go from being just a young girl's size dreams to becoming a professional rodeo star. So your young, naive dreams are becoming real. Your thoughts of what you wanted to be is got your first horse. Everything is happening. Your parents can afford a really good horse. Your dad anticipates acceleration in your development as a horsewoman that he gets you a horse too powerful for you, and you call the horse power because your father anticipates your power in the world as a woman. And you've got a man and a father shrewd enough and wealthy enough that a horse that expensive is the right horse for you, because he's probably spent like $50,000 on that horse. So the movie also talks about an economic level of bliss. The bliss of your father is connected to him buying you a horse that catapults you. Your father's great pride and faith in you, and your own answering faith, and your mother's unstinting support, except for, worrying about you, making sure, do you have enough gas in the truck? Is your phone turned on and all this stuff? So you're watching like a religious, semi-realistic view of a middle-class fantasy. And she's on the road singing to her favorite song, or becoming a woman. The sun is out. She sent her mother a text of the sunrise. And you're just identifying with this woman. Even though we know she's going to be paralyzed. I'm like, this is it, Mom. She's playing on the couch with her phone. I'm like, Mom, come on. I can tell it's coming. She looks down at the map beside her. Oh, her GPS system says we've gone out of range. So you put yourself in her shoes. It's like, oh, fuck. Like, all right, I'm off the grid, technically. Right? I don't have something to orient me anymore, which I'm sure she does, because there'd be a map on your GPS and all that kind of stuff, right? And she has a map on the seat, right? And she reaches for it while she's driving. And so every man, woman, and child is going, oh shit, you're looking off the road. And I said, Mom, I know it's coming, because look at how she's behaving. So she undoes her seat to go and get the map, and the car starts swerving. From the looks of it, more so the accident, she's probably moving a pretty good clip, because she's on an old desert road. Let's say she's like 50, 60 miles an hour in her Ford F-150. And if you've ever driven a truck with no canopy, those things can fucking start moving around pretty easy, right? And most men can command them all right, but I mean, you start moving around on the highway at that speed, and you're going to start starting a snake. That snake is going to start moving, and your whole vehicle is going to be taken up with a tremendously, very quickly lived pendulum that's worthy of the great orchestras of, the Marquis de France. And then she does, and it eventually goes where it's going to go. And then the truck, of course, for cinematic purposes, actually comes. It's like a NASCAR car, It's like it comes off the road. It's flipping in slow motion, and you're like, "Fuck!" You see her inside going, "Ah!" and banging against it, and then eventually she's like, if you ever want to see how someone got flung out of a car, the car window's open, and she is, the truck is flipping, and she's almost blessedly flung out, and they're shot from behind a fence with a fence post with barbed wire, and she's flung all the way out, and it's almost like at that point she could have probably gotten up and walked away, but then she ran the fence post at like 25 miles an hour, you know, and she dislocates and crushes, a critical vertebra, and not completely severing her spine. Now, if you've read the movie, it's like she becomes paralyzed and she's going to ride. And the doctor comes out of the hospital and says, "Your daughter," and she tells her the truth. Like, you think medical people, they got to tell you, trying to hurt you. It's just like, to the best of his knowledge, he's like, she's paralyzed. It's going to be permanent. She's going to be in a wheelchair the rest of her life. And the mom's like, "I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this. Em doesn't think that. I don't think that way. And she doesn't think that way. Don't, just take me to her. We don't think that way. We're not a family that just becomes paralyzed and accepts it." And she's smart enough. She's a class woman when the doctor says the spinal cord wasn't completely severed, but he missed. But that really doesn't mean much, you know? But if you're a viewer and you're the woman, and maybe doctors would say, okay, that could give a layperson a sense of hope, which is all the movie needs to go on. A little reasonable doubt, little suspension of disbelief, right? Bad day for everyone. But anyway, at least she's alive, and there were some agonizing